This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
Next on the 5 o'clock report.
Those technical restrictions are very much connected to the wartime condition. Safe passage is secured.
Once the straits open, those gas prices will go back to normal relatively quickly.
We have to get back. There's so many more pictures, so many more stories.
Now, let's go to the newsroom.
The shipping news. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Webster. The U.S.-Iran ceasefire is looking slightly more promising now than it did about 24 hours ago. Today, several ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz.
Those technical restrictions are very much connected to the wartime condition, and it takes time to be removed. So safe passage is secured.
Iran's foreign minister, Kevin Hassett with the National Economic Council, tells Fox News if the strait stays open, U.S. gas pump prices will go down.
Since we produce so much oil, then it's been much less disruptive, if disruptive at all, really in the U.S., aside from high gas prices, which I know are a big concern for lots of people. But once the strait's open, those gas prices will go back to normal relatively quickly.
Some industry observers, however, say any substantial impact here will take months before prices get back to pre-war levels. First Lady Melania Trump says she knew nothing about Jeffrey Epstein's sex crimes and wants false stories and images of her associated with him to stop. Speaking to the White House today, Melania Trump said she's never been friends with Jeffrey Epstein, never rode on his airplane.
The individuals lying about me are devoid of ethical standards, humility, and respect.
She went on to call any allegations to the contrary false smears that have to stop. The First Lady says her lawyers have contacted several individuals and companies behind those statements, and they've been asked to retract them as well as any stories. She named James Carville, you might recall him as the former President Clinton strategist and Democratic operative, as one of the individuals. President Trump, meantime, starting up his war of words again with Greenland. While criticizing NATO on Wednesday, Trump called Greenland a, quote, big, poorly run piece of ice. Speaking to Reuters on Thursday, Greenland's prime minister fired back saying, quote, we are a proud population of 57,000 people. The president has repeatedly pushed for the U.S. to take control of Greenland since he returned to office last year. NASA's Artemis II crew of 4 astronauts prepping for their return to Earth, expected to splash down in the Pacific not far from San Diego tomorrow evening. Commander Victor Glover very excited to get back.
We have to get back. There's so much data that you've seen already, but all the good stuff is coming back with us. There's so many more pictures, so many more stories. And I haven't even begun to process what we've been through.
U.S. Navy and medical teams from Camp Pendleton will all be waiting for the Orion space capsule. Navy divers poised to be the first to reach the astronauts in the water after their history-making trip around the moon. Some health news for you next. An interesting correlation between marriage and cancer prevention.
A University of Miami study of 4 million cases finds that never married adults face significantly higher risks of nearly every major cancer. The biggest gaps appear in preventable ones like lung, liver, and cervical, where lifestyle habits and early screening make the difference. Researchers believe it's not the wedding ring itself, but the spouse effect, having someone to nudge you toward checkups, healthy habits, and emotional support.
Next to the weather, hurricane experts are predicting a somewhat below average 2026 Atlantic hurricane season. Colorado State University researcher Phil Klotzbach says he can thank El Nino for that.
The odds of El Nino look very, very high, but the question obviously is, how strong is the El Nino? A weak marginal El Nino typically has a lot less of an impact than a really strong El Nino. But overall, it's certainly not looking as conducive in the Atlantic as, say, it did the last few years at this time.
He's predicting a total of 13 named storms, 6 hurricanes, with 2 of those being Cat 3 or higher. An average hurricane season in the Atlantic sees 14 named storms and 7 hurricanes. The season runs June 1st through November 30th. Authorities in the Bahamas have arrested the husband of the Michigan woman who disappeared after falling off a boat. NBC's George Solis says an attorney for 59-year-old Brian Hooker confirms his arrest as the search continues for missing Lynette Hooker.
Authorities here saying they have used assets even from the U.S. Coast Guard to help them in the search, as far as air support and even divers in the water here. Brian Hooker, for his part, releasing a statement saying he is heartbroken that his sole focus has been on finding his wife, Lynette.
Hooker says his wife fell overboard from their 8-foot dinghy last weekend because of unpredictable seas in the Atlantic. But according to his lawyer, he's categorically and unequivocally denying any wrongdoing. Lynette Hooker's daughter, though, says her mother was a strong swimmer with more than a decade of sailing experience. She says she doesn't understand how she could have fallen overboard and disappeared. Well, the debate over birthright citizenship took on a new dimension recently with an airborne birth.
The woman went into labor on board a Caribbean Airlines flight from Kingston, Jamaica earlier this month, prompting the pilot to request a medical team upon arrival at John F. Kennedy Airport. The baby was born as the plane was landing, triggering questions as to whether the newborn is a U.S. citizen. Some say the baby is, arguing the plane was within U.S. airspace, but others question the exact location of the plane at the time. In-flight births are very rare, as flying is usually not advised well into a pregnancy. On a lighter note, an air traffic controller joked to the pilot that the baby should be named Kennedy. In New York, I'm Kristen Marks.
All right, still to come here on the 5 o'clock report, a recap of our top regional stories and highlights from today's Faith Under Fire. Now checking the stories making news where you live across New York and Pennsylvania. All waterways in Onondaga County, including Oneida Lake, closed to boat traffic until further notice because water levels are near record highs. It's got anglers like Daniel Nageli of Waterloo, New York, doing some extra fishing from the shore.
This is the highest lakes I've seen in 10 years. Yeah, it brings the fish in closer to shore.
It's the same story on Seneca Lake. Water levels there Wednesday at 447.6 feet, just shy of flood stage. Geneva Assistant City Manager Taylor Youngs tells WHAM.
I think the most noticeable thing is you can see there should be a walk path out to where this dock is, and it is completely underwater.
City and staff are working to clean up a lot of washed up debris. No word on when paths and boating will get back to normal. Staying with the water theme, a boil water advisory still in place for most of the town of Elma, New York, after a water main break earlier this week impacted over 10,000 people.
We don't know how long the boil water alert will be up. Obviously, you're safe to shower and things like that. It'll just be to drink or cook with.
Town Supervisor Wayne Clark, who tells WGRZ the break happened Tuesday, and inside the town's pumping station, it was a flood.
At the time, until all that water got out, we couldn't even see what needed to be repaired.
So that boil water advisory remains in effect for now in the town of Elma, New York. Next to Philadelphia, one person dead, two still missing after 7 levels of a parking garage under construction collapsed. These guys saw it.
It was a big boom, and then, I thought it was thunder and lightning.
They wake up one morning expecting I'm just going to work, and something happens now, like they're not coming home and now their families.
Mayor Sherelle Parker.
We will not stop until we do everything that we can to locate those 2 people who are currently unaccounted for.
3 people rescued. Parker says a chunk of the roof fell in first. That triggered a progressive collapse of connected sections. She says permits were issued properly and inspections were up to date. New York State's Labor Commissioner visiting the Southern Tier Wednesday to tout Governor Kathy Hochul's child care reforms in that still-to-be-passed state budget. Roberta Reardon speaking in Watkins Glen.
Really making sure that people have not just affordable but accessible, because, we're in a rural area. It's really hard. If the daycare is too far away, you're not going to be able to take advantage of it anyway.
Under the proposed budget, the state would invest $4.5 billion in child care and pre-K programs across the state. And finally, back to Pennsylvania, where state regulators are raising concerns about a major power line project proposed for Central PA. We get all the details from Family Life's Brian Query.
The Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission is pushing back on a nearly $2 billion transmission line planned to stretch more than 200 miles from West Virginia into Perry County. Energy companies NextEra and Exelon say the high voltage line is needed to maintain reliability as demand grows. But state regulators argue the project hasn't gotten the proper review in Pennsylvania or West Virginia. In a federal filing, the PUC warned it's too early for the project to receive financial incentives, saying ratepayers should not subsidize development before approvals are in place. The proposal would run through several counties, including Juniata and Mifflin, and could be operational by 2031 if it clears regulatory hurdles. Brian Query, Family Life News.
Thank you very much, Brian. Up next, highlights from today's Faith Under Fire. Human trafficking is showing significant increases in New York and Pennsylvania. Family Life's Sarah Harnish sat down with the president of Lantern Rescue, Corinne Moon, and Pennsylvania State Rep Clint Owlett to talk about what you can do to help keep your kids safe. We start with digital human trafficking, done on a cell phone.
We often think of human trafficking as the white van on the corner, and that is not the case in rural Pennsylvania. But what we're seeing more is digital human trafficking, where people are targeting our kids through their phones, through different apps and different relationships, and trying to engage them with conversations in hopes to get them to share content with them that they can then use to blackmail the students.
You think your kid's safe when they're in their room and you're in the living room watching a movie, and in reality, they're in their room talking to people that are trying to exploit them. There's another word called sexploitation that's becoming popular, and that is exactly what Representative Owlett had just said about how they will meet someone online, that person will start to groom them, get them to send explicit images and videos, and then use those to force them to create more. We also see grooming to where they actually end up meeting in person. So these people are wanting to develop this slow, long-term relationship with them so that it's not sending up red flags immediately, and it's happening within people's homes. It's happening on the devices. I've had tons of parents come and speak to me about, at seminars that I'm at, they come and speak to me and they have their kid standing next to them. The kid is playing on the phone, completely engrossed in the phone, and the parents are talking to me about how to tell their kids to stay away from strangers. And I'm like, well, there's a really good chance they're talking to them on the phone right now. Like, do you know what's on that phone? Do you know what they're doing? So it's not to say don't be cautious of external threats, but it is more likely that it would be someone that the child knows, whether it's in person or virtually, that would try to traffic them.
It seems like it would be a difficult thing to rein in, almost like playing whack-a-mole. You knock one conversation down, but how on earth do you begin to stop what predators are doing online?
We've done some seminars on this in our district and had some really amazing stories that have come from it, where parents are all of a sudden realizing the threat that's out there. Their eyes are opened up, and the need for engagement in your kids' lives is so important now. It's always been important, but the threats and the temptations and opportunities and the people that are preying on our kids through their phones is astronomical. So you have to be engaged in your kids' lives more now than ever, and be engaged in what they're looking at, who they're talking to, all that stuff. I had an intern that stopped by my office. She was actually interning with another House member down in Harrisburg, and I asked her randomly, I'm like, hey, so I'm just curious. I'm working on this presentation on digital human trafficking. I said, out of, the high school kids that she was from down Lancaster Way, out of your friends in high school, how many of your friends are actively talking with people that they don't know online? And she's like, oh, at least 90%. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And she said, yeah. She's like, absolutely. It's not abnormal at all to talk to people that they have no idea who they're talking to on a regular basis online. And those types of things, it can lead to some really dark places for these kids. And we want to make sure that parents are aware of that. And so is it a piece of legislation? I don't know. We're still trying to figure out what the best way to handle this is. But what I often tell people is never underestimate the power of a sausage patty and a pancake. Engaging with your kids at such a high level, and your grandkids, having those hard conversations, those awkward conversations. We're parents. We do awkward conversations every day. It's fine. But have those conversations with your kid. Take them out to breakfast. Engage with them on a regular basis. Do it often. Don't just say, well, I talked to them one time about digital human trafficking and check the box, it's over. The threat is never over. And so put up safeguards. Try to look for ways to engage with them. That's the real practical way. That's not a piece of legislation that's going to get stalled in the Judiciary Committee in Pennsylvania. These are things that we can address at home and with our families. It just takes a little bit of grit and know-how and added involvement to do that. And that's what we're employing people to do. These are issues that we can handle at the home front, and we have to.
Highlights from today's Faith Under Fire are Sarah Harnish with the president of Lantern Rescue, Corinne Moon, and Pennsylvania State Representative Clint Owlett on efforts to fight human trafficking in the Keystone State. You can hear the entire feature and all of our Family Life original news features at Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and FamilyLife.org. This is the 5 o'clock report on Family Life.
The wealth of the rich is their fortified city. They imagine it a wall too high to scale. Proverbs 18:11. Hi, I'm Rob West with the Faith and Finance Minute. In 1 Samuel 25, Nabal is described as a wealthy man with enormous flocks. For months, David and his men protected his shepherds and livestock. Yet when David humbly requested provisions during shearing season, Nabal responds with arrogance. Who is David, despite owing much of his prosperity to that protection? Trusting in his status and possessions, he failed to see the danger he was in, just hours away from a military raid. It was only through the wisdom and humility of his wife Abigail that bloodshed was prevented. Wealth may feel like protection, but only humble dependence on God provides true security. Get biblical answers to your financial questions in the Faith Fi community. Download Faith Fi, Faith and Finance in your app store or visit faithfi.com.
Thank you, Rob. Finally at 5, they teed off this morning in Augusta, Georgia, at arguably the most storied golf tournament of them all, the Masters.
First bad driver swing of the day.
I don't think you could buy that in the merchandise shop. In the bag.
That's a first for me, Shane.
A lighthearted moment on ESPN during this morning's opening round as Xander Schauffele's drive on the 8th hole landed right in a patron's bag full of souvenirs from the gift shop at Augusta National Golf Club. It was built in 1930 by famed golfer Bobby Jones and New York investment banker Cliff Roberts. In 1934, they started an annual tournament, originally called the Augusta National Invitation Tournament. Eventually, they changed that name to the Masters. The winner gets that green jacket, but they can't take it home. It stays in a locker there. The site used to be home to a tree nurseries, and that's why each hole is named for a shrub or tree. Fans who attend are called patrons, who enjoy low-priced food like the famed pimento cheese sandwich. They must also abide by 2 big rules. Number 1, no running on the course. Number 2, no cell phones. You get caught with one at Augusta, and they will kick you out. And that's the world we live in for Thursday, April 9th, 2026. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Mark Webster, Family Life News.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.